Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Resume Lab. My name is Dorothy Baumgartner, and I'm a career advisor here at WGU with the Career and Professional Development Office, and I'm so glad you took time to join me today. We've got lots of great tips and best practices for you to learn about resumes. First, I'm going to just take a quick minute and do some housekeeping things. First, want to acknowledge that everybody's got different learning styles and different needs, so please take care of yourself first, step away, stretch, take care of whatever you need to take care of in your life, because as you heard and see on the screen, I am recording this, and that will be available for you after the system processes it, and I can get it mailed out. Often it's later today, can be up as much as 24 hours, but I will get that out to you, so never fear. If you need to step away, you'll still get all the content. However, I do want to encourage you to make note of this email at the bottom of the screen here, careers@wgu.edu. That's our team email in Career and Professional Development, in the Career and Professional Development unit, and that's the best way to get in touch with us. So you keep track of that email. You are welcome to send a question in if you think of something later today. Or if you have a different topic, a career topic that you need some help and information with, you can reach us that way. Got some other contact information at the end of this email, but at the end of this presentation, but that email is a good one to hang on to. And then the other thing I just want to mention is that I am not monitoring the Q&A. So if you've got questions, please do put them in the chat. And it's great if you're comfortable sending that to everybody, because then I can capture them. If there's something that I don't see in the chat, I'm able to see that later. If you send it to me privately, the system won't capture it. So if you're comfortable using the everyone chat, that would be great. All right, well, let's jump in then to the session overview. Our agenda today is that I'm going to spend some time talking about applicant tracking systems and what happens to your resume and application materials when you apply to a position. So you understand how those work, and why that's important to understand is because it should impact how you're developing your resume. We'll spend a little time after that doing a resume walkthrough. So we'll go through every section of a resume, and I'll point out some good tips and some best practices and things that you really want to pay attention to. We'll spend a few minutes on some do's and don'ts, just kind of as a recap of those best practices. Then we'll take a little bit of time and look at a position description. It's a sample description, but to just look at what's the way to look at a position description, kind of identify what are the things that you should be highlighting in the resume that you use to apply for that role. And then we'll have hopefully some time for Q&A at the end. But again, I will do my best to take questions as we go through. I'll likely take them in, breaks or, section transitions in the agenda. I also will prioritize, because we've got a number of people in the lab today, we'll prioritize questions that are the most applicable to the broadest number of people. So if you have a question that's really specific to your personal situation, I may not be able to take that today and might refer you to our message line where you can talk directly with an advisor. But I'll do my best to get to what we have time for today. So with that, let's jump in to applicant tracking systems, or ATS as we refer, that's our shorthand. We refer to, so if you hear us talking about ATS, this is what we mean. So these are the, these are the software platforms, pardon me for a moment. ATSs are the software platforms that companies use to process application materials and follow you all the way through a hiring process. There are many of them out there, and there are also very varying levels of sophistication in terms of how complicated or how complex those systems are. Some of them are very advanced, and many of them are not. So there's some critical things that we want to share with you about what happens, so that you understand how this impacts how we recommend you develop your resume. This is the first place that's your application materials are initially assessed. It's the first round. And so what happens in that assessment is that there's an algorithm that's reading your resume, that's scanning it. So one of the two critical things that you need to know about this is, first, about formatting. A lot of these systems cannot actually handle many of the aesthetic formatting features, and they can be your resume can be misread because of that. So this is a little bit of a conflicting thing. One of the things you're probably going to experience is you've heard different advice from somebody else about resumes, and you're going to hear different advice from somebody else about resumes. So what we do in our office is we try to counsel you based on the most research that we can get a hold of, and what we, what our experiences in working with many students and alumni. And so one of these things is this formatting thing. It's a little confusing because you'll see all those beautifully designed resume templates out there that say, stand out as a candidate, use this gorgeous template, and they're beautiful, right? And those are great if you have a hard copy that you're going to hand to somebody in a networking event or an interview. But many applicant tracking systems cannot read color, columns, borders. A big one is tables and text boxes. They just can't read it. So if you have all of those lovely things on your resume, that's great if you're going to hand it to somebody. But we would really counsel you to have a plainly formatted Microsoft Word version, black and white, format for the resume that you're submitting into ATSs, so that you're sure that it's not working against you in any way and you're really getting through that system. The second thing that's important to know about ATSs is that algorithm that is scanning your resume is looking for keywords that match the position description, and they assign your resume a match rate. That score is what determines whether or not your resume is high enough in the pile to move on to a recruiter. So if you have a low score, it might not ever be seen by a human being. So many of the things that we recommend in terms of the way you develop and format your resume are based on the fact of, one, you need to get through the applicant tracking system. And then when a recruiter sees your resume, the research that we have shows that they spend about 7 seconds skimming your resume before they make a decision whether or not to continue reading it. So we have some tips about placement of things so you're capturing that precious 7 seconds with a recruiter's eyes. So that wanted to just give you that background to talk about this. So just a little bit more about the formatting piece, and then we'll talk some more about the keyword customization a little bit later. So as I said, they're very bad at reading some of these aesthetic features. Another just side point is that we all kind of have learned that PDFs are supposed to be universally readable. That is not always true in applicant tracking systems, unfortunately. They're getting better, but which is why we counsel that unless a position description posting specifically says PDFs accepted, that it's probably safer to go with a Microsoft Word formatted document. And things like, as I mentioned, columns, colors, tables, text boxes, icons, things in the header or footer, different kind of bullet symbols than the standard automatic Microsoft bullet sometimes can get skewed. So you want to be sure that you avoid all of those things to get it through the applicant tracking system. But then finally, you do want it very clean and professionally laid out with a good visual hierarchy, so it's really easy for a person to scan it. So just want to check to see if there's any questions about what I've said so far, not so far. And I will say, just kind of to reemphasize this point, I mean, I like, feeling a little bit like a one-note wonder when I keep going on about this formatting stuff, but I have seen a screenshot from an Amazon recruiter of the way a resume looked when that came through to their screen. And the applicant must have put their name and contact information in color or in the header because the top of the resume was blank. So they had no idea who the person was or how to contact them. And then there was a skills section and the whole area right below it was blank. So that was likely in a text box or a table. So that's what, and that was Amazon. So that's what I mean by those things may not be read by the applicant tracking system. So the other point I do want to make about that is that because there's such a variety of systems, you might have tried using a formatted template that's got colors and columns and have gotten some responses. And so I've worked with lots of people who said, I think my resume is okay. I've got a couple responses, but I haven't really gotten what I thought I would get because I thought I was more qualified this. Well, the likelihood is that you hit some applicant tracking systems that are able to read those, but many of them may not be. So it can be a little bit deceptive. You start to think, well, it's working okay. how come I'm not getting more responses? It may be just because of your formatting. It has nothing to do with the level of your qualification. So hope I made the point there. Simpler is better, just so that you're sure that it's working well for you. All right, we're going to jump now to talking more specifically about the sections of a resume. So I'm going to kind of walk through this sample. And you'll see, the first thing I hope you'll notice is the font is all the same and the same size throughout the resume except for the name, okay? One of the things that makes it easier to skim is not having a bunch of different fonts or sizes for your head, for your headers and for your content. So it's best practice is to keep that font consistent all the way through your resume. Just help your name stand out a little bit with a larger font size. So this is like 16 to 20 point, and the body of your text should be between 10 and 12. 10's a little small. I mean, it's okay, but you do have to recognize that you may be sacrificing a little bit of skimmability if you go that small. So let's walk through these sections. A professional summary or a summary of qualifications or professional profile, it's called sometimes, is optional. I see it on probably, I'm going to just take a stab and say roughly half of the resumes that I review. This can be a brief description of your professional experience. This is something that you're probably more likely to use farther into your career because you are summarizing the experiences to make it really easy for those highest qualifications for the job you're applying for to stand out to a recruiter. This is the first thing they're going to see. Their eyes are going to fall on the summary. So you want that summary to really be customized to the job that you're applying for. So that may mean you are tweaking this somewhat every time you're applying for a job because there may be different skills or experiences that you want to highlight for that job. All right, professional experience. This is something that you can title professional experience. You can call it something more specific. For example, in this situation, there's a recommendation. If you're going for a marketing role, you might call this professional marketing experience, and so or relevant experience. I'm going to hop quickly to the next slide to show you why you might list this as relevant experience. So let's say you've had a marketing experience 3 years ago, but you've been doing something different since that doesn't really relate to the job. You probably want that marketing experience to stand out first. So you might title this marketing experience and put your marketing roles here. Here I'm jumping to the next slide. And then you'd have another additional experience for maybe your current completely unrelated job unrelated to marketing and anything else like that in the history so that you can demonstrate work history. So that's an option. You can separate your professional experience if that kind of situation applies to you so that you can make your most relevant experience stand out at the top of your resume because it's more likely that within those 7 seconds, the recruiter is going to see it then. So the way to list your work history is your job title should be first and bolded. This is the thing that recruiters are going to be most interested in, generally more so than what the company was. See a lot of resumes that come in with a company bolded first and then the job title under that. That's harder to skim. So what was it that you were doing? Demonstrate that by highlighting your job title, and then you can include division or subsidiary. If you don't need that, you could put employer name, city, state on this same line, saving you some space. And then put the dates right aligned with your right margin. This is important because we do have research that shows that recruiters are skimming the right side of the page to get a quick overview of your experience. And so you want to make sure that you are I'm going to make sure I have my point here. So you're seeing this so that you're right aligning those dates all the way down your line. Now, the right side of your document. So it's easy to skim. And again, here you could just put the employer name, city, state on the same line. So you can get all of the job information on one line. Optionally, you can include a line that's generally describing the business and your job responsibilities. Again, this should be really brief if you include this. I don't see that often, but it is an option if you're finding that it's challenging to get enough information in your bullet points. You're going to be thinking about 3 to 5 bullet points for most positions that you're listing here. Sometimes, obviously, that's not nearly enough if you have a really complex role that you're trying to describe. But again, I'm going to go back to the research. Never more than 7 bullet points is important to stick to, because the eye just starts to skip over anything that's that text dense. So you want to at a maximum have 7, probably better for you if you can keep it in a 3 to 5 kind of a range. You want bullet points to be a full line, basically, not more than 2 lines if at all possible. I know occasionally that just isn't possible, but you want them short and easy to skim. So here's the way we want to recommend you think about these bullet points. I'm going to spend some time on this and take note. If you stepped away and you're watching the recording now, take note. If you're distracted by something, stop it and take note. This is important. There's a difference between responsibility statements and accomplishment statements in the way you write those bullet points. We've all been sort of conditioned or trained or, to think about writing responsibilities statements on our resumes. Here's the job, here are the responsibilities. The issue with that is that it kind of reads like a job description. So if you are describing a, customer service associate role and you just write responsibility statements, this is what you did, this is what you did. The problem with that is that anybody else who had that kind of a role can write basically the same thing, and then it doesn't distinguish you at all as a candidate. So what I want you to think about doing is pivot your thinking to shifting to writing accomplishment statements. And the difference between them is that you are going to include details in your statements that demonstrate how you did your work, how well you did your work, what the value you added to your work. So the way you do that, here's the construction of an accomplishment statement. You're going to start with a strong action verb, the strongest verb. So with a few exceptions, sometimes you can't always do that, but almost, all the time, your first word should be a strong action verb. Push yourself to find those. We've got a resource on our website that's just called action verbs, and it's just lists of action verbs if you're stuck. But you want to stay away from things like responsible for or worked with or provided as much as possible, because those don't really tell me a skill. Partner tells me a skill. Analyze tells me a skill. So start with that action verb, and then you're going to describe the task or the activity. And then you want to start to include things like numbers, percentages. See how your eye is drawn to those. The numerical form is better than a written out form. If you're, with proper grammatical format is if you're writing something that's less than 10, you use the written form. But on a resume, I would include the numerical form just for the eye draw that causes. So things like numbers or percentages or dollar figures are great too. So those kinds of things draw the eye and provide some concrete, quantifiable demonstration of verifying, validating basically your statement of your work. So the numbers can be like number of people you worked with, number of students that you taught, number of projects that you accomplished, numbers of calls that you took, number of customers that you served. Push yourself to think, can I include a number here? Dollar figures would be if you did something that generated revenue, or if you suggested a process change that resulted in a cost savings for a company. If you have access to what that dollar figure was, that's great. If you have an estimate, that's okay if you don't have an exact figure. And percentages, obviously, percentage decrease in customer complaints, for example, or percentage increase in student test scores. Anything like that demonstrates the impact that you made. So another detail that you may want to include is examples. Let's say you're talking about your teacher and you're talking about classroom management strategies. You may want to say such as, and then include a couple of examples. If you're talking about 17 projects that you worked on, such as, and include a couple of examples. Again, that moves your statement from a statement of I did this thing to here's some concrete evidence that I did it. And then the other thing you always want to include whenever possible is the impact, outcome, or result of your action. That's also demonstrating value. So obviously, if you include a number, percentage, or dollar figure, that's a metric, it's quantifiable, that's indicating the impact or the result. But even if you don't have a metric, you can include an impact statement. Like, so for example, again, a teacher might say implemented classroom strategies such as X, Y, and Z, and then the impact of that is creating a safe and conducive environment for all learners. You can still make that kind of statement even if you don't have something quantifiable around it. Those are the things that demonstrate that you make a difference. So what I recommend that everybody does with your resume is go through every one of those bullet points and go through the exercise of saying, is this the strongest action verb? Have I described this activity or task clearly and succinctly? Can I add a number? Can I add a dollar figure? Can I add a percentage? Can I add an example? Can I add who it was for? Can I add a result or impact? Obviously, you're not going to have all of those things for every bulleted statement that you write. But if you go through that exercise and sort of push yourself and kind of end with, so what? So what difference did this make? That's the kind of information that an employer is going to really notice because it's showing the value that you have brought, implying that's the value you are going to bring into your new work. They want employees that make a difference. So that was a lot, but accomplishment statements are really important on your resume. So I really wanted to make that point. Make sure that you understand how to write those. We do also have a resource on our website that's a worksheet called Writing Strong Accomplishment Statements that can help prompt you to do that. So I wanted to really drill in on this because I see a lot of resumes that just say, did this, did this, did this. You don't stand out any differently, than other candidates. And so the thing here is that you know that you did good work, but your reader doesn't. So you have to tell us and you have to give us some specific things that help us know how you did that. All right, so enough about that, but you're going to list that kind of thing for every job. You're going to repeat it for your next job, same kind of thing. So that's the kind of format that we recommend. I'm going to jump now to that next page that we peeked at before. And again, if you use the relevant professional experience subheading on that you saw on the previous page, you can list additional experience. And in something like this, you're really demonstrating employment history, demonstrating that you don't have an employment gap. You may not necessarily even have action verbs here. It may just be the job title, the employer, and the dates if you're just trying to show consistent employment history. Let's talk about education. Your degree also should be listed similar to the way you do your jobs. The title should be bolded. So your degree should be first. You do not need to put the word degree in there, but you should put what the degree is. Master of Business Administration, but you might be Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity, Bachelor of Arts. That's sufficient. You don't have to add degree into that. You can include a specialization if appropriate. So if you are a Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education, if you have a like special ed or a K-8 endorsement or certification, that's where you would put this. Again, you're going to put your date on the right side of the page. If you haven't completed your degree and you're in process, which most of you probably are, you want to include the word expected or anticipated and then include the month and year of your target graduation date. That demonstrates that you're in process. You want to stay away from a date range connected to a degree because that can often get interpreted as you studied there but didn't earn the degree. So you're just going to put your end date. Then you should include, obviously the name of the institution where you did it. In our case, obviously, Western Governors University. Governors does not have an apostrophe, by the way. See a lot of those. And then the location of the university should be included as well. So here's a tip for something, especially if you're a career starter or a career changer and you don't have relevant professional experience to put on your resume for the kind of role that you're going for. You can include a subheading titled Relevant Courses and include 3 to 5 course titles highlighting the things that you've accomplished in your degree program so far, courses that you've taken. Alternatively, if you have space on your resume, you could include those as separate lines. So you'd have a bullet point, the course title, a colon, and then a brief description of the course. You can go back to the learning objectives for the course to get some of that language. The reason you might want to include that, again, is if you don't have that relevant professional experience. Remember what I said in the beginning about what that ATS algorithm is doing. It's looking for keywords that match the position description. So this is a way that you can include some of those keywords of things that you have demonstrated competency about through your degree program, even if you can't demonstrate it in your work history. Capstone project can do the same thing, can include some of those keywords there that you're aiming to try to match in that position description. So think about the way the position description is written and try to mirror the language as much as you can in this coursework, also in all of those previous bullet points that we were talking about. You want to be mirroring the language of the position description. Another thing that you may want to consider doing is if you are a career starter or career changer and your degree is really relevant to the jobs that you're seeking, is you may want to move your education up higher on your resume, like perhaps below a professional profile or summary, because that again is going to be one of the first things that the recruiter, your reader, is going to see. And if you don't have relevant work experience and they dive into looking at your work experience and it's completely unrelated, you may not make that 7-second cut. So the placement of your education is not hard and fast. It doesn't have to be at the end of your resume. You can make decisions. Really what you're aiming for is what's the most relevant information that demonstrates my qualifications for this job. I want to make sure that's up near the top of my resume so it's seen first by that recruiter. All right, a couple of other things that in terms of length, really best practice these days is to lean toward having one-page resumes. I know that's tough, especially if you have deep and complex experience. That may not be possible. So you can go over a page if you have that kind of significant experience. But if you're going to go over a page, make sure it's not a couple of lines. Do the due diligence and discipline and try to get the rest of your resume concise so you can get it on a page. But if you have enough to go over a page, it probably should be in at least, the territory of a third or more text of that page to justify going that far. If you don't have that much, you probably can get yourself to narrow it down to a page. Now, there's some things that you can do dealing with that page, related to font and margins and things like that. You can play with margins. Typically, we start with a 1-inch margin around all sides of your resume. You can go down to a 1/2 inch if necessary. I would not do less than that. But you also want enough white space so in your resume so that you've got that visual hierarchy. When that recruiter's skimming, you want to make it really easy for them to see your important qualifications. All right, I just want to check, do we have any questions? I don't see any questions in the chat. Don't forget questions in the chat, please, not in the Q&A. I'm not seeing the Q&A. All right, let's look at some resume do's and don'ts. You want to choose a really classic font. We used to say things like Times New Roman and Calibri or an Arial. I am seeing more and more recommendations to do sans serif font, which is what Calibri and Arial is like, rather than a serif font, which has the curly Q. Oh, this got changed. My PowerPoint got converted. I'm sorry, I had a sample in here. Serif font is like Cambria, Times New Roman. It's got the little curly Qs on the end of the font. Okay, I've got a question. Can we get a copy of that template after the webinar? I'm not sure what template you were talking about. If you were talking about the resume that sample that we were looking at, you will get a copy of this recording and you can skim forward to that to take a screenshot if you'd like to do that. I think that's probably the quickest way that we can get that to you. Question: if we do have a gap in your resume, is it okay to only include years of employment instead of months and years? Yes, that's okay, and it probably depends a little bit on your situation and what you're talking about. So I do want to mention we do have a resume review service, which I will point out how to do that toward the end of this. And it may be if you you might want to use that service and send in a question and say, here's my situation. Does my resume help me get there? Thanks, Damien. Just already put the link to our job site there, or our resume site there under Get the Job. You can find the resume section. There are a bunch of templates in there. Okay. Okay, we got a bunch of questions coming. This is great. Hang on just a second. Would soft and hard skills fall under the additional experience as well in their own section, or just try to weave them throughout the resume? I would recommend that some of those you may want to consider putting in a summary or professional profile so that they stand out, and then also weave them into your experience. Some people separate them out in skills, but in the push to try to get a succinct one-page resume, oftentimes separating out of skills where you have soft skills that takes up extra space that's really unnecessary. I think hard skills, a hard skills section is really appropriate if you're in a really heavily quantitative kind of IT computer science, those kinds of roles. You're pulling out skills that are going to be listed in the position description. So there is not a definitive answer to this. And I will say, most of the time when you ask questions about your resume, the answer is very likely going to be it depends. It depends on the job description and it depends on your situation. So your key document in answering questions about should I or should I not do this on my resume is really going back to that job description, because the framework that you should be using is the purpose of this resume. I mean, you're not going to have, you shouldn't think about, I finished my resume and here it is, it's all done. Your resume is a living document. And the way you should be thinking about it is the purpose of this resume is to get an interview for that job. So you're using that job description to make decisions about what to highlight and what to put where. Have a question for, do I have a cohort for a government resume? I'm not sure if you mean a template. We don't have a template, and usually government resumes often go through things like USA Jobs, that site, and they have a whole process there. So Sandra, if you're not familiar with USA Jobs, you may want to take a look at that. We don't have a specific template for a government job. Okay, so I'm going to keep going through these do's and don'ts. Okay, again, just in terms of the font, you want to go with the sans serif font. It's cleaner, easier to skim. You want to be really consistent in your formatting. So if you underline one of your section headings, underline all of them. If you put periods at the end of your bullets, put them on all of them or don't. But that kind of attention to detail can also demonstrate something about you and your attention to detail. So if you're applying for a job that attention to detail is really important, you want to be sure. I mean, I would say this is always important, but you want to be sure that you have really proofread for even those kinds of things, so you're sure you're consistent all the way through your resume and your formatting. Your content, again, needs to be really intentional by customizing it to the job that you're seeking. So you may, in some job applications, you may pull out a bullet point because it's about a previous work history, because it may not be relevant. And there may be something else like a relevant course that you want to put in that actually does better demonstrate your qualification. So you're going to be making some judgment calls and adjustments. So that's the being intentional and customizing. So I will say lack of customization is the #1 reason that qualified candidates don't get called for an interview. You might be very qualified, you just didn't match that keyword score high enough. So can't emphasize this enough, that job posting, that job description is your guide for answering most of your questions about your resume. Some don'ts. There's this thing that goes around often that says like, hey, just copy the whole job description in white, because then it'll match everything. Don't do that. I can't emphasize that strongly enough, because it's almost impossible to get a 100% score in an ATS. And if you do, that's going to be a red flag, especially if they start reading your resume and they realize you have a gap in terms of, one of the skills that's required. There are companies that will blacklist you if you do this for that job. There are companies that will blacklist you permanently from applying if they discover that you do this. So just don't be tempted to do that, because, what you just did is tell them that you cheat, and that's not an employee they're probably going to want to hire. You don't need to list references or say references available upon request. Recruiters say I will ask you for them when it's appropriate, and in the when it's at the appropriate point in the hiring process. So save that space for those other really important things you need to do to demonstrate your qualifications. Again, I'm going to hit that formatting, tables, text boxes, borders, columns. Stay away from all of that stuff because it can skew the way your resume comes out. You do not use personal pronouns in a resume. So saying I, me, my, we, our, all of those are not appropriate. It's not a narrative. You should be using third-person voice. Additionally, one thing I forgot to mention is that objective statements have really fallen out of favor with recruiters. They'll say things like, if you're applying for my job, I know you want a job like this. So use that room, again, that real estate on your resume, to maybe write a personal profile or summary that does demonstrate qualifications more so than this is what I'm trying to achieve. All right, checking for more questions quick. All right. All right, we're going to move on to looking at a job description. So this is that key document when you're making decisions about your resume. And so if you're applying for a job that you're really interested in, you want to go through it for any job that you're applying for. You want to go through it and do this kind of exercise where you are identifying what those important keywords are that the algorithm is likely looking for and that you likely will be asked about should you be invited for an interview. So one of my colleagues went through this and just took this, kind of made up this sample position description, went through and highlighted what are keywords. So what you're doing basically is you're reading the bullet point or the paragraph, the sentence, and saying, what's the most important here? What's the skill that they're looking for? So communications, collaboration, and iteration are all skills that are going to be important. That's in the overview here. So those are things that you should be sure that you address somewhere in your resume about your qualifications. Leading community development initiatives. So what experience do you have in community development? Look, we see, customer service here, customer service initiatives, right? Service, we're seeing service here. Independent work is important in this role. Decision making is important. Then we start to see some repeats, customer service. So that's why this is bolded. So my peer went through this and highlighted the words that they thought were the most important skills, and then went back and said what shows up more than once. So anything that's bolded here, you'll see communications, collaborations, customer service, and service level, again, are all highlighted. Those are things you absolutely want to be sure that you prioritize the demonstration of your skills in your resume. So, and then obviously there's some specific things here like Agile and Scrum, but these are the kinds of words you want to be sure that you're including. So you may have said something about, I'm trying to think of another way to say this. You might have said, I used a different way to describe understanding a customer lifestyle. Wow, I'm having one of those days. Sorry, spitting out my words. To describe customer life cycle, you might have described that differently in one of your previous work histories for this job. You'd want to change it to use this exact language because that's about that keyword match. So you might, here's another example. You might have said strong troubleshooter, good troubleshooting skills in your overview or in one of your bullet points. Well, in this case, that ATS is not smart enough to recognize that troubleshooting is the same as problem solving skills. Hopefully one day we're going to see some improvement in that, but right now it's much safer to just do that tweak on your resume for applying for this job and change it to problem solving skills. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now, that seems like a lot of work, right? People kind of say, oh, like I have to redo my resume every time I apply for a job. Got some tools on the next slide that will help make this much easier for you. These are some resume customization tools. And so I'm going to say this again, the lack of customization is the #1 reason qualified candidates don't get called for an interview. So it's worth your time to invest in doing some customization when you're applying for each job. So Tag Crowd is a word cloud generator. If you don't know what that is, it takes and scans a document and then makes a word picture of the words that are the most dominant in the document. So what you'll get is if you upload your resume, it will give you a picture, and the word that's used the most is going to be the biggest in the word cloud, and then other words are proportional. So a really quick way to kind of check your resume against the position description is to go to Tag Crowd. This is free. You make one word cloud of your resume, one word cloud of the position description. And if it says strategic really big in the middle of the position description and you don't have it anywhere in your word cloud, you maybe should think about, is that something that you can address? Can you tweak some of your language as long as it's a legitimate experience? I'm not telling you to make up experiences, of course, but if you just didn't describe it that way, you might say, oh yeah, of course I have strategic experience, I just didn't say it that way. So that's a really easy way to do it. Now these resume scanners are going to give you a much more detailed overview. These behave pretty similarly to a lot of ATSs, and I've listed 4 of them here. SkillSyncer, Jobalytics, and ResScore, I believe, are all free. JobScan is a subscription-based service, but you do get 5 free scans, and it's a really good one. So I would say JobScan for the ones that like you've played around, With the other ones, you've got your resume in pretty good order. You really want that job, I do it last check on JobScan. But you can check all of those out. And these are places, again, where you upload your resume and the position description, and it will score your resume. It will score your application. It will give you some specific information about why why you didn't score something or other. I mean, it'll tell you words that you're missing or skills that you're missing. I want to caution you that the first few times that you do this, please do not be shocked or concerned that your score is low, because that is the most common experience, but it's mostly because those words aren't matching. So for example, I did this for a candidate who's well qualified for a position. They rated pretty low on, I don't remember which one I did, but it was because of things like one of the documents had the word analyze on it and the other document had the word analysis and it came up as not a match. That's an easy fix. You're just changing the word form on your resume to match the position description. So hopefully these will be good tools for you. I actually haven't used ResScore, but a student I was working with recently had just used it and really recommended it. So I wanted to get these out to you so that you can use these tools that will really help you with starting to understand this customization problem and process. And after you do a few of them, you may be able to just do it on your own fairly quickly because you'll start to understand, what you need to pay attention to. All right. So I want to jump to our website, and I'm actually gonna, I have a couple slides here, but I want to actually jump to the website. If you, I don't remember who it was, but somebody already put this in, but I want you to go to this website. I'm going to point out a couple things that actually aren't resume related just really quickly because we have a little time here. Because what I want to show you is a few things that are really key. If you haven't been very deeply into this website, it's a little hard to navigate, but let me point out a few highlights. As you're job searching, you may want to go up here to these career tools and you see resources by college. This is a section a lot of people don't know about, but for each college, we've curated career guides, job boards, and professional development opportunities that are relevant to that. So I'll let you explore the boards and the professional development on your own, but I do want to call your attention to the career guides. For every college, there's a page like this that says, what does a career in information technology, business, health, education look like? And each of your degrees are listed here. They want me to apply with affiliated roles that are affiliated with that career. So like for here in IT, cybersecurity, bachelor degree. So you look at all of those careers. Each one of these is a link to another page which gives you specific information about that role. So if you don't know about this page, this can help you clarify if you're not quite clear about what job titles to start to pursue. This can be really helpful. It tells you what do they do. Let me see, do I still have my highlighter on here? I don't. Let me see, can I get that? Oh, it's not letting me do that. So sorry. Why did we get off of that? Now I lost I lost my too many windows open. Apologies. Let me do this again here. I've got to move some windows, folks. My apologies. Got everything collapsed, so. There we go. All right, we're going to go to careers. Yeah, WebEx is giving me a little business here. Okay, we're going to go to careers. Can you see my browser, or are you still seeing a? Yeah, well, it is jumping all over the place. Okay, I'm going to actually use the PowerPoint here because this occasionally this happens, so that's why I have these slides in here. So my apologies about this, but the way I was going to resources by college, and I can't show you that live right now, but it does have those career guides. It can be enormously helpful in getting some good information. It's got things like what education do you need, what skills do you need, what do they do, what are typical salaries, and what's the projected job growth. So do check out those resources by college career guides. And that is, let's see, yeah, that's here, career tools. resources by colleges, and then that'll open that page. But the other thing that I want to point to you now is this resource library. There's some great material and plan your career if you're early in this phase. We're going to go to get the job, but I also want to point out if you're a diversity candidate or a vet, there's some really good job related resources there as well. So once you click on get the job, you're going to see resumes here. And I'm going to try this one more time because I really do want to. Okay, now good. I hope you can see my browser now. So we're going to go to Career Tools, get the job, and you'll see resumes. If somebody can give me a thumbs up to make sure you're following me on the website, that would be helpful, just because I'm having some WebEx. Okay, great. Thanks, Bobby. All right, so here's the resume section that I want to point you to. There's a couple things particularly that I want to highlight. In step 1, we have this resume course. This button, go to resume course. This is a click through. After taking this lab, there's some of these sections that you may not need, and you can, just click through them. It should take around 20 to 30 minutes, and you may be wanting to have your resume open, so you're updating it as you go through that. At the end of this course, you see here, completing this course allows you to request a written review of your resume, all right? So, so you'll get those instructions at the end of the course. We ask you to go through the course and update your resume so you're taking care of some of that low-hanging fruit, and then when we do our review, we can really spend our time on your content. So that's the number one, complete a resume course. And I talked about some supplemental materials on our website that may be helpful for you. This is where they are. Step 2, supplemental resources. How to build a strong professional profile. It's got an example on some tips in there. Remember I said action verbs are really important. This is the document that's just a whole bunch of verbs. So if you're stuck and you can't think of a verb that adequately describes your skill in the most powerful way, check out this document. Here's the accomplishment statement worksheet. Remember I spent all that time on those bulleted statements. This can help you with developing those strong accomplishment statements that are demonstrating how well you do your work and the value you bring. And then if you're stuck, there's another document that's really good, questions to ask to create awesome accomplishments. It just has a bunch of prompts in there to get your juices flowing and get you thinking. I also want to point out step 4 here. This is where our templates are. All of these templates and samples that are listed here have been scrubbed for those applicant tracking system formatting problems. And I'm going to pull up the IT sample just to demonstrate something. Remember I told you that columns often are not well read by applicant tracking system. Wow, it looks like there's columns in this IT resume. Well, this has actually been formatted without the column function. So this is just a straight, symbol and a tab and text and another tab and symbol and a tab and text. So it simulates a column, what a column looks like. But if you want to list something like certs or skills, this is a good resume to come to. If you don't know how to do that kind of formatting, you can just hopefully grab this and insert it into your resume and then update it to use your text. So that's a way to sort of fake the column look. So I wanted to pull that up so you notice that. And then if you're in teaching or nursing, there's some additional resources here that direct you directly to the Teachers College has very specific guidelines about your clinical experience and your demonstration teaching resume, so you want to come here to get to that information. Okay, and then there's also some additional information for those of you that are in the health college if these things apply to you. So I just wanted to point out those resources on our website so that you're sure you know how to get to them. And let me just jump through that. And so I'm going to leave our contact information up here, but happy to spend some time doing Q&A. But before I do that, in case anybody needs to leave, just want to point this out. Again, here's our website. There's that email again that I shared with you in the beginning of the lab. We also have a message line, and I'd really recommend that you take advantage of this, especially when you're working on your resume. A lot of students make resume appointments with us, but you might, and I mean, we have pretty good availability, but sometimes you're waiting a week or something to get a resume, like maybe you just have a quick question. So make note of this line. It's a message line. You leave a message, use this option 3. and just, leave your information. Say, I have a question about my resume. The more detailed you can be in your message, that's great. Let us know when a good time to call you back is. We try to call you back within 4 hours, within 4 business hours, as long as you've left that message by 2 p.m. Mountain, or else we try to get back to you by the next business day. So it's faster often than making an appointment, especially if you just have, a couple specific questions. So make sure you notice there. And then we're also on Facebook and LinkedIn. So you can find us a lot of different ways. And so, okay, I want to kind of work on some questions here in the chat. And so feel free, we do have a little extra time here. If you need to go, great to have you with us today. I will send the recording out as soon as it gets processed. And let's talk about questions. I held 2 positions with the same company because I was promoted internally. How can I show the 2 positions held with the same company? Great question. The way I would recommend you consider doing that to save some space is, in that case, you would list the company and the company and the location, company and city, state, and then list the position title with the date range and your information for each position, and then for the position, and then your next position with the date range. If they're really similar positions, if the work is very similar, you were promoted and the job title increased, you may want to just list the position title and the date, the position title and the date, and then all of the bullets below that, and sort of bundle it. You're welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you came. Happy to share this information with you. Don't be a stranger. We are here to help in career and professional development. Do use these resources. The website is a great resource. I know it's a little challenging to navigate, but there is a lot of rich material in there for other kind of career supports that you may need in different aspects. Networking, interviewing, cover letters are right below the resumes if you're looking to also write a cover letter. Okay, I've got another question. I have a big chunk of time spent as a founder, CTO plus business. I'm having trouble focusing my resume. So I'd recommend that you, I'd probably need to know more about that to comment very intelligently about that. This goes back to, remember what I said, a lot of the time the answer is going to be that it depends. I would really want to talk with you more about what are the kinds of roles that you're interested in applying for, because that may give some direction to what you need to prioritize in your role. I'm sure as a founder, you have a really broad range of skills and experiences. And it would be tempting to list all of those in 17 bullet points, right? That's not going to get read by a recruiter. So depending on what sector you're in and what kind of a job you want to go in, you can make decisions about what's most important to include. So one of the things that I will say that I didn't say before is that I do recommend that you, in your whole process of developing your job search and your resume, is if you have a fairly clear idea of the kind of roles you want to go after, to pull 3, 4, 5 position descriptions for that kind of role that are active, make copies of them, and do what I call a pattern analysis, which is you are looking across those descriptions for what are the responsibilities and the requirements that are in common across all of those. Those are going to be the core requirements and core responsibilities for that type of role generally. I mean, one of them might be missing one, another might be missing another, but when you're seeing something frequently, you want to think about that as sort of your master job description and build your resume for that role around that. So go through that, highlighting those key words and making sure you're addressing all of those things in the master resume that you develop for that role. Then you've got all the stuff there, and it'll be much easier to customize when you're applying for a specific role. You're probably more deleting or things that aren't relevant to that specific role, or you're maybe tweaking some of your language to mirror that position description. So the it depends thing comes back, and I'm not sure if I answered your question about your big chunk of time as a founder, CTO plus business, but I think it does really depend on the kind of role that you're going to go after. Look at that kind of position description as your guide to determine what you want to highlight first. All right, do we have any more questions in here? You can book a session through our website. Let me see, I'll pull this back up. You can go to contact us and you'll see advisor appointments here. Again, you know, you may want to try this callback number. That's probably often quicker, but you can go over here to the advisor appointments and then schedule an appointment here. Okay, what's the best template to use if I just want to post my resume on Indeed somewhere and have employers find me? I'm entry level with no experience in my career field. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a diversion in this resume lab and talk about something a little different than resumes, because here's the thing. I mean, you can, so in answer to that question, again, I would say go pull several position descriptions of the type of role you want and build that. I mean, there isn't a best template. It really is, you know, what are you trying to achieve in your job search, and build your resume to reflect that, and then you can use that if you're going to do something like post on Indeed. However, the segue that I'm going to make is to give you some stats about those job boards. They can be very useful, and you can find, you know, you can find lots of good jobs on them. However, we do follow the research of some national organizations, that national career organizations, job searches and, you know, career pathways. And some of the statistics that I've seen recently from one of them is that your return on investment for your effort, if all you're doing is applying to jobs through those. Hello? Can you hear me now? Looks like I had a little bit of an internet glitch there. I apologize. Okay, I was just about to say, what you're doing is, if all you're doing is applying through these jobs, you are playing a numbers game that is stacked against you. And that is because if you think about that, it's a subset, pretty small subset of the jobs that are available, and everybody's applying for them. So the competition's pretty high. So that's one strategy that you absolutely should follow in your job search. But the other thing that you should do is really think about making networking a cornerstone of your job search. In that same research study that I was just citing about the job boards, the return on your investment for that kind of activity, just apply, if you know, are just sending out 129 resumes from Indeed, Monster, and ZipRecruiter, your return on investment for that effort is about 4%, whereas your return on investment in successfully landing a job through networking is over 50%. So that's a teaser and a promo for attending one of our networking workshops, because we've got a lot of good information that can support you in September. We've got a new workshop that I'm doing the first week in September about developing your LinkedIn profile so that it's powerful and working for you. And we've got another series of them through September in terms of maximizing it for the job search. So take a look at our workshop offerings for September and sign up for those kinds of things. You know, I'm not saying don't apply through all of those job sites, but just know that that's a piece of your strategy. It shouldn't be your whole handshake. Bobby, thanks for sticking that link in the chat. They've provided the link to our events page, so that's where you can sign up for those workshops. I'm not sure September workshops have hit handshake yet. That should be coming like within the next several days. So if you don't see them now, check in the middle of next week so you can sign up for those. All right, everybody, thanks so much. Thanks for hanging around. I'm sorry about that internet glitch. I will be sending a recording later today or tomorrow, depending on when it all gets processed. Appreciate your being here. Take a note of this telephone number. If you have a quick question, a follow-up question, don't hesitate to call us there, or you can also make an appointment as well. Thank you. Take care, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day.